The small room was silent except for the faint ticking of an old clock on the wall. Keanu Reeves sat at a wooden table, the kind that had scratches from years of quiet meals and forgotten mornings. In front of him, there was a small cake. No decoration, no bright icing, just a simple chocolate cake with one single candle standing in the middle. The candle flickered as if unsure if it belonged there at all. Keanu leaned forward slowly. His eyes were calm but heavy, carrying memories that most people could never guess. He was not a man who loved grand celebrations, and tonight he was alone, just as he had been many times before. Yet there was something haunting in the quiet of that room, something that spoke louder than laughter could ever speak. He closed his eyes for a moment. What could he wish for? Fame had already followed him for decades. Fortune had come and gone, but peace of heart was what he longed for most. He bent down, and with one gentle breath, he blew out the candle. The flame vanished, leaving a thin line of smoke that curled upward like a silent prayer. Then, as if the universe had been waiting for that moment, there was a knock at the door. Keanu froze. It was late. Far too late for a normal visitor. The sound echoed through the room, breaking the fragile quiet. His chest tightened, and for a second, he thought about not answering, about letting whoever it was walk away into the night. But something inside told him this knock was different, that this sound carried meaning. He stood slowly, his feet brushing against the wooden floor. When he reached the door, he hesitated with his hand on the knob. The knock came again, softer this time, almost as if it carried both patience and urgency. Keanu opened the door. Standing there in the glow of the dim hallway light was someone he never expected to see again. A face from his past. Someone tied, not to Hollywood or to fame, but to the days when life was still simple and raw. The visitor's eyes held a mixture of nervousness and warmth, as if carrying a story too heavy to hold alone. "Hello, Keanu," the voice said, quiet, almost breaking. For a long moment, neither moved. Keanu felt his chest ache, the way old wounds ache when touched again. He finally stepped back, motioning for the guest to come inside. As the door shut, the silence of the room grew heavier, but now it was filled with questions. Who was this person to Keanu? Why had they come on this night of all nights? And what truth, long hidden, was about to be revealed? The cake still sat on the table with its candle now dark, the smoke gone, leaving only the mark of something extinguished. It seemed almost symbolic, as if the candle had been waiting for this moment of interruption. The guest looked around the room, their eyes lingering on the cake, the single candle, the emptiness of the evening. They smiled faintly but sadly, and then they turned back to Keanu. "You didn't expect me, did you?" the guest said, almost whispering. Keanu shook his head slowly. "No, but maybe I should have." And in that instant, the story of the night began, one that would carry them through memories, regrets, kindness, and revelations that neither could have predicted. Keanu stood quietly, his hand resting on the back of the chair, watching the guest take hesitant steps into his small apartment. The room was dim, with only the soft glow from a corner lamp lighting the space. The guest's shadow stretched across the floor, long and uneven, almost like a reminder that the past had walked in uninvited. The air was thick with silence. Keanu's heartbeat in his chest, not fast, not slow, but heavy, as though each beat carried a weight of memory. The guest did not sit. Instead, they walked toward the table, their eyes fixed on the small cake with the single candle that had already been blown out. "One candle," the guest whispered, almost to themselves. So simple, so lonely. Keanu said nothing. His lips pressed into a line, but his eyes softened. He had always been a man of silence, letting emotions speak louder than words. But tonight the silence felt fragile, like glass ready to break. The guest finally turned, meeting his gaze. Their voice trembled, though not from fear, more from the weight of what they carried. "Do you remember," the guest began, "that night in Toronto, long before you were famous? It was winter, snow everywhere, and we didn't have enough money for a cake. So we lit a match instead, and you said it was enough." Keanu's breath caught. The memory struck like lightning. He remembered it. He remembered the cold, the cheap apartment, the laughter that had tried to cover hunger. And he remembered this person, sitting across from him, sharing a night that had seemed so small at the time, but was now burning bright. In his mind, "I remember," Keanu said softly. The guests smiled faintly, but their eyes watered. "I wondered if you still would." The tension in the room thickened. Keanu pulled out the chair, motioning for them to sit. But still, the guest hesitated. Their hands trembled as they finally lowered themselves, their shoulders bent as though carrying years of unspoken truth. "Why are you here?" Keanu asked, gently. The guest looked down at their hands, then up again, their voice breaking just enough to carry emotion that pierced the heart. "Because I can't carry it alone anymore." Keanu leaned forward slightly, his arms resting on the table. "Carry what?" The guest's lips trembled. "The truth. Something I should have told you years ago. Something that might change the way you see me, maybe even the way you see yourself." The words hung in the air like a storm about to break. Keanu's chest tightened. His life had been filled with sudden storms, with grief that came without warning. But there was something different about this one. This storm had waited years to arrive. He tried to keep his voice calm, steady, though his throat felt dry. "Then tell me," he whispered. The guest closed their eyes, drawing in a slow breath, as though preparing to step into deep water. When they opened their eyes again, there was fire there mixed with sorrow, mixed with hope. "Before I tell you, you have to promise me something," the guest said. Keanu tilted his head, waiting. "Promise me," the guest continued, "that you will listen until the end, that you won't walk away before I finish, because once I begin, it will hurt. It will hurt both of us. But it has to be told." Keanu's chest ached, but he nodded slowly. "I promise." For the first time since entering the room, the guest's shoulders lifted slightly, as though the promise gave them permission to breathe. But the tension in their face did not fade. They leaned forward, their voice low, trembling, filled with the kind of truth that digs deep into old wounds. "Keanu," they whispered, "the night your world fell apart, I was there. And what you thought you knew is not the full story." The words cut through the air like a blade. Keanu's fingers clenched against the table, and the silence of the room grew so loud it almost roared. His heart pounded, not in anger, not in fear, but in the raw shock of hearing something he never imagined could be said on this night, in this room, over a single extinguished candle. Keanu leaned back in his chair, the wooden legs creaking against the floor. The words hung between them like smoke, thick, heavy, impossible to ignore. "The night your world fell apart, I was there." His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in confusion. He had lived through nights that felt like endings, nights where grief had stripped him bare. But which night was the guest speaking of? His past was a trail of shadows, and each shadow carried pain. The guests sat with their hands folded tightly, as if holding on to keep from falling apart. Their lips trembled, but they didn't look away from him. "You remember that night?" the guest said, their voice quiet but steady. "The one where everything changed. The night you lost more than you could ever put into words. You thought you were alone in that pain. But you weren't." Keanu's jaw tightened. His breath came slower, heavier, as he leaned forward, his elbows pressing into the table. "Tell me," he said, though his voice cracked under the weight of the moment. The guests closed their eyes for a long pause, as if they needed the darkness to find the courage. When they opened them again, their eyes glistened. "I was there," they whispered. "Not by accident. I chose to be there. But I never told you because I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew, you'd see me differently. Afraid that you'd hate me for keeping silent." The room felt smaller now. The walls seemed closer, the air tighter. Keanu's mind spun, trying to grasp what the guest was confessing. "What are you saying?" Keanu asked, his tone sharper now, though still soft enough to reveal he was holding himself back from breaking. The guest's voice broke as they continued. "I knew what was coming that night. I knew something was about to happen, something that would shatter you. I wanted to stop it, I wanted to change it, but I couldn't. I was powerless. So I stayed hidden, watching from the shadows, because I thought at least I could protect you if things got worse. But I failed. I failed to protect you, and I failed to tell you the truth." Keanu's chest rose and fell slowly, his breath heavy, like thunder building before rain. Anger did not rise in him, but something else did, an ache, a sting that came from realizing that pain he thought was his alone had been witnessed by someone else, someone close enough to carry guilt for it. "You..." Guests' hands trembled as they spoke again. "Every year since, I wanted to come to you. I wanted to tell you everything, but I was a coward. I thought you deserved peace, not another wound. Yet when I saw that candle tonight, I knew I couldn't keep it hidden anymore." Keanu's voice was almost a whisper. "Why tonight?" The guest swallowed hard. "Because I heard your silence. I felt it from far away. I knew you were alone again, carrying the same weight you carried back then. And I thought maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to share the weight. Even if it means you'll never forgive me." Keanu's eyes softened, though his face remained unreadable. The silence stretched between them, long and tense, but beneath it, something stirred. Curiosity, sorrow, the faint spark of compassion he could never fully extinguish, even when life had been cruel to him. He finally spoke. "If you were there, if you saw it, then you know details no one else could. You know the parts that still keep me awake at night." The guest nodded slowly, their eyes shining with both fear and certainty. "Yes, and I know the truth you never discovered, the truth that might change the way you see everything that happened." Keanu's hand gripped the edge of the table, knuckles pale, his body tense. "Then say it," he demanded softly. "Don't leave it half-told." "I kept my promise. I am listening. Now keep yours and finish it." The guest drew in a shaky breath, their shoulders trembling. Their lips parted, but before they spoke, their eyes darted to the cake again, that single candle that had burned. Only moments before, they stared at it as if it were more than a candle, as if it represented everything unspoken between them. Their voice, when it came, was almost a whisper. "The truth is, you were not the only one who lost everything that night. I did too. And the reason is because the one you lost was the same one I loved." The words cut like a blade through the silence. Keanu's heart slammed in his chest. His mouth went dry. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt, the room spinning with the weight of what he had just heard. His breath trembled, his voice barely holding steady as he spoke. "You loved them?" The guest's eyes glistened with tears, but their voice was steady now, raw with honesty. "Yes, I loved them as much as you did, and I hid it because I thought it was enough to be near, to watch from the shadows, to never take your place. But that night, when everything ended, I lost them too. I just lost them in silence." Keanu's chest tightened until it hurt. A storm rose inside him, shock, grief, betrayal, compassion, all colliding at once. He leaned back slowly, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly against the table, and for the first time that night, his eyes filled with tears. Keanu sat frozen, his body still but his heart racing like a drum that refused to quiet. The guest's confession echoed. In his ears, I loved them too. For a long time, the room said nothing. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator in the corner filled the silence. The candle on the cake had been blown out long ago, but now its absence felt sharper, as though even the flame had chosen not to witness this truth. Finally, Keanu spoke. His voice was calm, almost too calm, but beneath it lay a storm. You loved them, he repeated, his eyes never leaving the guest's face. All those years, and you never said a word. Not to me, not to anyone. The guest's shoulders sagged. I thought silence was the kindest thing I could give you. I thought, if I stayed quiet, you would never feel betrayed, but my silence. It betrayed me instead. It ate me alive. Keanu's fingers drummed lightly against the table, his body tense with unspoken questions. You watched me mourn alone. You saw me break and you stayed in the shadows. Why? Why let me believe I was the only one carrying that grief? The guest's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't look away. Because you needed space to grieve. Because I was afraid my truth would feel like theft. I didn't want you to think I had stolen a part of them from you. I wanted to respect your love, your loss. So I buried mine. Keanu's jaw clenched, his voice dropping lower. But by burying it, you buried me too. Do you understand that? I spent years believing the pain was mine alone. I thought no one understood. And all this time, you knew. The guest's lips trembled. I knew, and I hated myself for staying silent. Every year on this same night, I thought about coming to you. But the fear always won. The silence grew unbearable again. Keanu's chest rose and fell as he struggled to balance the emotions pulling him apart. Anger, sorrow, pity, understanding. He wanted to shout, to demand why life had played such cruel tricks, but instead, his voice softened. You should have told me, he whispered. The guest's tears fell freely now, sliding down their cheeks as they nodded. I know, and that's why I'm here. Not to ease my guilt, but to finally share the truth, because I realized something tonight. Grief doesn't divide, it connects, but only if we let it. And maybe it's time I stop holding this alone. Keanu leaned back, his eyes drifting to the ceiling, searching for answers in the quiet glow of the lamp. His mind replayed the nights of loneliness, the long walks in empty streets, the hotel rooms where silence pressed harder than walls. He had always believed no one else could feel the same depth of loss he carried. But now, sitting across from this guest, he wondered if loneliness had tricked him. He looked back at them, his voice calm again. You say you loved them. Then tell me, what did they mean to you? Not in silence, not in shadows. Say it now. The guest's breath hitched. They closed their eyes, gathering strength, then spoke, their words trembling but true. They were light, the guest said softly. Even in their smallest moments, they lit up everything. The way they laughed at things no one else noticed, the way they gave kindness without ever asking for it back. I loved them because they made the world less heavy. And when they left, the world grew dark. I lost that light, just like you did. Keanu felt his throat tighten. Every word pierced him because it mirrored his own memories. He saw the same laughter, the same kindness, the same quiet grace. For a moment, he wasn't angry. He was simply broken all over again. But then came a twist, a thought that cut deeper than the rest. If you love them so much, Keanu said, slowly, his eyes narrowing, then were you with them that night? Did they know? Did they know you carried this love? The guest's face went pale, their eyes dropping. Their silence answered before their lips could. Keanu leaned forward, his heart hammering. "Were you there?" he pressed. The guest's lips parted, trembling, but no words came. Their silence screamed louder than truth. Keanu's hands gripped the table so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "You were there, weren't you?" the guest finally whispered, their voice breaking. "Yes, I was there, closer than you ever knew. And if I had spoken that night, maybe things would have ended differently. Maybe they would still be here." The room seemed to tilt. Keanu's breath caught in his chest, sharp, ragged, filled with the weight of betrayal and sorrow. All at once, his eyes filled with tears, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Then all these years, you didn't just hide your love. You hid your presence. You hid the fact that you were part of the night that destroyed everything." The guest broke. Down, their head lowering into their hands, their body trembling. "I wanted to tell you. I wanted to confess 1,000 times. But how could I? I thought it would kill what little peace you had left. I thought you would hate me forever." Keanu's tears fell silently, running down his face as he whispered, "And what makes you think I don't hate you now?" The guest lifted their head slowly, their eyes swollen with tears. "Because you are Keanu Reeves. Because no matter how much the world has hurt you, you never chose hate. You chose kindness. And tonight, I am begging for that kindness, even if I don't deserve it." Keanu stared at them, his breath heavy, his heart in pieces. He had lived his life with humility, with resilience, with a quiet grace that the world admired. But tonight, his greatest test stood not in fame, not in fortune, but in the choice to forgive someone who had been both a silent witness and a silent betrayer. The choice hung in the air, waiting. The air between them was so heavy that it seemed to press down on the walls, on the table, on their very hearts. Keanu's eyes were fixed on the guest, sharp but glassy. Filled with tears he refused to let fall too quickly. The guest, trembling, tried to meet his gaze, but shame pulled their eyes away. The silence was unbearable, stretching like an endless corridor where both were too afraid to walk forward. Finally, Keanu broke it. His voice was low, steady, but every word trembled with the weight of years. "You were there," he said again, slower this time, as though forcing himself to believe it. "All this time I thought I was alone in that moment, but you were there, watching, hiding." The guest's lips parted, but their voice cracked. "I was afraid. If I stepped forward, everything would have changed. You would have looked at me differently. Maybe you would have hated me even then. I thought silence was mercy." Keanu leaned back in his chair, his hand dragging across his face. He laughed softly, not with joy, but with disbelief. "Mercy? You call that mercy? Mercy would have been honesty. Mercy would have been giving me the truth when I was drowning. Instead, you let me drown thinking no one else knew what it felt like." The guest wiped their eyes with shaking fingers. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was protecting myself. I was wrong. I see that now. But if I could go back, I would stand beside you. I would never let you face it alone." Keanu's chest tightened. His heart pounded against his ribs, caught between anger and sorrow. The guest's words felt like both balm and blade, healing and cutting at the same time. He rose slowly from his chair. The guest flinched slightly, not from fear of violence. Keanu was never a man of violence, but from the weight of the moment. Keanu walked toward the window, pulling the curtain aside to stare into the dark night beyond. The city was quiet outside, lights glowing in windows, lives moving forward while his own felt trapped in a storm from years ago. His reflection looked back at him faintly in the glass. Older, more tired, a man who had carried grief longer than anyone should. "You know what hurts the most?" Keanu whispered, his back still to the guest. "It's not that you loved them. It's not even that you stayed silent. It's that now, hearing you speak, I realize you carried the same pain I did, and I could have shared mine with you. We could have survived together. Instead, we both survived alone. The guest's breath caught. I wanted to share it. I swear I did. But every time I tried, I saw your face, the way you looked so broken, and I told myself, not tonight. He can't take more tonight. And then nights turned into years. Until now. Keanu turned slowly, his eyes wet but steady. And now? Why should I listen now when it's too late to change the past? The guest's eyes were fierce now, desperate. Because it's not too late to change the future. We can't bring them back. But maybe we don't have to carry the grief as enemies. Maybe we can carry it together. The words pierced Keanu's chest. His heart pulled in two directions. Part of him wanted to push the guest away forever, to lock the door and never open it again. But another part, the part that had always believed in kindness and humility, whispered that there was truth in what they said. Still, he needed more. He needed to hear the one thing he never had, what truly happened that night. His voice was firm now, steady but sharp. Then tell me everything. Stop hiding. Stop circling. If you really want me to listen, if you really want me to believe this is about healing, then give me the truth. Every detail. Every moment. Because I swear, if you hold back one more secret, I won't forgive you. Not now. Not ever. The guest froze, their face pale, their lips trembling. They looked down at their hands, then back up at him. The truth, they whispered. You want the truth? Then you need to know this. What happened that night was not only tragedy, it was choice. And the choice made was not yours. It was mine. Keanu's breath caught. He stepped forward, his voice shaking. What do you mean? The guest's tears fell harder now. I was with them. I saw what was about to happen. I could have stepped in. I could have shouted, changed the path, stopped the moment before it collapsed. But I froze. I chose silence. And in that silence, the worst happened. I have lived every day since knowing that my silence was the difference between life and loss. Keanu's legs felt weak, his body heavy with shock. He stumbled back into the chair, staring at the guest as if seeing them for the first time. You mean... His voice barely came out. You could have saved them? The guest's face twisted with agony. Yes. But I didn't. I failed. And that is why I came tonight. Not just to confess love, not just to share grief, but to beg for forgiveness for the moment I let fear destroy both of us. Keanu's chest ached so deeply it felt like breaking. The truth had been delivered like a dagger, and yet behind it was a plea, a desperate reaching hand asking to be taken or rejected. The silence that followed was no longer just silence. It was a battlefield, where forgiveness and anger stood facing each other, waiting for Keanu's choice. The room had grown unbearably still. Keanu sat at the table, his hands pressed flat against the surface, as though grounding himself against the truth that had just shattered the night. The guest sat opposite him, their body trembling, their eyes swollen from tears, waiting for the verdict that only he could give. For a long time, neither spoke. The seconds stretched like hours, heavy with what could not be undone. Keanu finally broke the silence. His voice was low, raw, trembling. Not with weakness, but with the weight of everything inside him. You mean to tell me, he said slowly, that you could have saved them, that all these years, while I carried this pain, while I searched for meaning in the loss, you carried the truth that silence was the reason? The guest's lips parted, their voice breaking. Yes, I failed. I froze. I let fear steal the moment from me, and I have never forgiven myself for it. Keanu's jaw tightened. He rose from his chair and walked toward the window again, his reflection staring back at him from the glass. His shoulders trembled, his hands clenched. He could feel anger clawing inside him, begging to be released. But beneath the anger was something else, something softer, something that reminded him of the many times life had tested him before. He had seen cruelty. He had tasted grief. He had been forced to choose again and again whether to answer with hate or with humility. And every time, he had chosen kindness. His voice was quiet, almost to himself, as he stared into the dark city beyond the glass. Hate has followed me many times in life, but I never let it win. I can't start tonight. The guest's breath caught, their body trembling as they waited for his next words. Keanu turned slowly, his eyes filled with tears but softened by something greater. You made a mistake, a terrible one, and your silence hurt me more than you know. But I also know what fear does. I know how it freezes you, how it robs you of strength. I know because I've lived it too. The guest's tears fell harder, their hands covering their face. Then you don't hate me? Keanu stepped closer, his voice firm but gentle. No, I don't hate you, because hate would not bring them back. Hate would not heal either of us. But forgiveness? Maybe forgiveness can. The guest broke down fully, sobs shaking their body. Keanu knelt beside them, placing a steady hand on their shoulder. His touch was not light. It carried weight. The weight of loss, the weight of mercy, the weight of choosing to share the grief instead of burying it. Listen, Keanu said softly. We both lost them, and nothing will ever change that. But maybe what we can change is how we live with it. Maybe instead of carrying the pain in silence, we carry it together. And in that, maybe we honor them more than we ever did before. The guest lifted their head, their face wet with tears, their eyes wide with disbelief. You mean, you forgive me? Keanu nodded slowly. I forgive you. Not because what you did was small, but because forgiveness is the only way forward. And because the one we both loved would never want us to live trapped in anger. The guest's body shook as relief washed over them, as though years of hidden torment finally found release. Keanu's own tears fell silently, but his face carried a calmness now, the calmness of a man who had chosen peace over pain once again. They sat together in silence, not the silence of secrets, but the silence of two hearts finally unburdened. After a long moment, Keanu rose and lit the candle on the cake again. The flame flickered gently, bright against the shadows. He looked at the guest and spoke softly. This time, we blow it out together. They leaned forward side by side. With one breath, they extinguished the flame. The smoke curled upward, but instead of sorrow, it felt like a prayer of release, a symbol that the past had been honored and the future was waiting. The night no longer felt heavy. It felt lighter, as if forgiveness had opened a window in the room. The grief was still there, it would always be there, but it was no longer a prison. It was a bond. Keanu placed a hand over his heart, his voice gentle, filled with humility and hope. We survived alone all these years. Now maybe we can survive together. The guest nodded, their tears softening into a fragile smile. And in that moment, the birthday was no longer about loneliness or grief or loss. It became about something greater, about the resilience of the human spirit, the humility to forgive, and the kindness to share burdens that once seemed unbearable.